live. Yeah. What is it? It's a Sunday in February, and Sunday live again. This special guest today, live from Atlanta, Georgia, Mr. Richard Devine. What is it? Sunday in... Yeah, I love that echo. Welcome, Richard.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here. How are you doing over there in your world?
It's been busy. Let's say, yeah, just kids. I've got 2 kids, and we were just outside running around trying to get last minutes of sunlight before the sun sets this afternoon. And yeah, during the winter months, it's hard to get a lot of sunlight down here, usually because we get rainy weather and it's usually too cold. So when there's a nice day, I try to take advantage of it, spend a little time outside.
For some reason, I always think of Atlanta as like being warmer because it's close to Florida, but it actually gets a pretty chilly winter, doesn't it?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it was actually, today was about 43 degrees, which was actually a nicer day, but most of the days, most recently, were in the 30s and rainy, and we had sleet and a little bit of snow yesterday, very light, though it didn't stick or anything like that. But yeah, it's typically the weather's pretty mild here, but you know, you do get the changing of the seasons and stuff. Like Florida is a bit different. The closer you get to the Gulf Stream and stuff, though, there's warmer air there, but we still get a bit of cold weather. So, but yeah, I've just tried to be better about getting vitamin D and just getting out and taking a walk and getting outside a little bit, as opposed to always being indoors.
Do you find that you spend I mean, I'm trying to imagine how much time you spend in the studio on any given day. Do you have a regular set of hours that you try and keep going with weekly?
Yeah, and my schedule changed quite a bit after we had our kids. Yeah, that, you know, before having kids, I would stay up all night till like 5, 6 in the morning. I'd come to bed just as my wife would be leaving for work. So we were like on these opposite schedules. And then when we had our daughter, that completely mangled my whole schedule and how I was doing things. Cause yeah, it was, I basically had to invert everything. I was like, all right, she goes down to bed. I'm going to go down to bed when she goes down to bed, get sleep. And then I'll just get up early. And now my schedule is like, I get up at 6 in the morning and then get the kids set up and sorted for breakfast or whatever and school stuff. And then I jump straight into the studio straight after that. And I just, you know, grind through, try to get like 8-9 hours of work in, you know, or at least, you know, 5 or 6 before lunch, and then another maybe 5 or 6 before dinner, and then put them to bed. And then I'll usually come down for another few hours before I go to bed. So it's kind of broken up in little sections, as opposed to just my life before kids was I could devote as much time as I wanted to. I could just, you know.
But even still, that is one heck of a schedule that you're maintaining.
It is. It's a lot of juggling. Yeah. Especially, well, now with COVID, things have been a little bit, I want to say it's been a little more challenging because I have a 3-year-old son who's an absolute maniac. And he was in a school. We had him in a little Montessori school that was only like 15 minutes from our house, and the school shut down permanently. I'd say like it was 4 months ago. I think, yeah, the lady that was running it, I think her husband got sick, and long story short, so she had to take care of her husband who now needs constant care. So she just shut down the school completely. So even if, yeah, in spite of all the vaccines and things kind of slowly kind of getting back to normal, we're having to look for another situation for him. So until we can resolve that, he's just stuck at home with us, and it's been fun. He's a blast to be around, but it's definitely challenging when you're trying to work and focus, and then you have like a 3-year-old screaming and breaking curtains and stuff around your house. But yeah, their kids can be a lot of energy. They can drain you. Just watching your kids can be physically and emotionally draining at the end of the day.
Are you on a different floor than than where you are with the family, or that you can go?
Yeah, yeah. This studio that in that I'm sitting in right now is basically the whole entire bottom floor of our house. It's the basement level, and we built it in 2000. Well, we started building it in 2011. We finished, I want to say it was like end of 2012. 2013 was when things were fully finished, so it took a little bit, but yeah, we furnished. It's got a Studio B room where we have like a Dolby Atmos surround system, and there's a VR system in there. So I do a lot of spatialized 360 mixing I did for Google and some other companies. So we had to set up a special room to do some of the mixing. We had to have a whole separate system that does some of the decoding and encoding of those files, and then have a space where we could test out stuff in VR. So we have like a VR setup in there with the HTC Vive system and all that. So that became sort of a side studio. Now that's starting to fill up with other gear and racks of stuff. It never ends. Yeah, I've already maxed out this space out. I think we're going to be looking to move maybe a year or two. We're going to start looking at some bigger houses, and then I'm not sure if I'm going to build a studio in the basement again, or if I'm going to do it like a whole freestanding sort of situation, where I think that might be a little better. Because I remember when we built this studio, we ran into quite a few problems, like when you're building a couple rooms where you have to reroute plumbing and air conditioning drainage lines and electrical and gas lines and stuff like that. We had to reroute all that. We had to move all that out of this room, that just took 2 months just to do that and figure out where we were going to reroute all that through our garage and everything. And I remember talking to a lot of guys on the Gear Sluts forum who had built studios in their basements, and they said that, if I had to do it again, I would have just built my studio in a freestanding building and not had to deal with rerouting all that stuff, because that was a real pain. So if you guys are thinking about it,
yeah,
that's
I also went through that too, rerouting of all the water and all the potentials that could go wrong. And it takes quite a long time. But your studio, man, it's just like a drool fest every time I see you post. Keeping up with the way that you have taken your studio. I noticed that you're always improving, and I can imagine that you've had the concepts that you're working towards and you're building on in your mind. And it seems like you're always sort of achieving a higher level, setting a standard. Where to start? I mean, I just absolutely love your concept of how your mixing console is kind of now broken down for what seems to be just ultimately the best input channels and effects channels, but not sort of like this giant mixer, not based around a giant mixer. That is super, super, super inspiring.
I've used
a goal that you had.
I'd used big mixing boards, my whole life. My first few mixing boards was like a test cam. I think it was like a 32 channel. Then we went to like the Soundcraft Ghost and the Mackie 32 8-bus, which was a favorite of mine. These bigger analog desks back in the early 90s. And then after that, I started using digital consoles and got like the DM2000, where everything was like 2496 and automated, and with Penny and Gauss faders and stuff like that I could hook up directly to my DAW. And I thought that was awesome, because it was nice to have this like central hub that all the gear could connect into. But running a big desk like that, there were constant maintenance issues. There were a lot of channels that would go out all the time, and a lot of noise and crosstalk issues. That's not a bad thing. I love the sound of analog desks. I still have several little like SSL desks and things here. Oh yeah, there's a picture of it there. So what I did is I got rid of my old digital console a few years ago, and I decided to go with a more sort of stripped down hybrid, what I call like a hybrid digital analog system, which would allow me to kind of pick my favorite EQs, compressors, saturators, and things like that, and have a very refined system that would allow me to do analog summing. So I use so basically this picture is is basically 3 racks of a bunch of outboard gear that I've been using, and at the top of the middle rack is I'm using the Dangerous Music Convert 8s, which is my DA converters basically, or my sound card or whatever, interface sound card. And then I basically use that and play into a 16 summing channel mixer, the 2-bus plus, which is in the right rack. So it's all kind of really small, because the way that everything, pretty much at the end of the day, all my stuff really pretty much ends up in the computer. I'm just kind of like, grabbing stems, processing those stems in certain ways. And, I have like a drum bus that I run my drums through, and then like various synths that I want to process in specific chains. I can do really quickly. And one piece of gear that was a huge game changer for me that I bought a couple of years ago was the Flock Audio Patch, which is this rack unit that's underneath my desk here, but it's like a 1U rack, which has got 32 channels of inputs and outputs that are all connected via DB25 cables. And what it is basically a patch bay that can be controlled with software. So it's like acts like and it's no A to D or anything, and it's completely passive. And what's awesome about their software, the Flock Patch app software, is that you can store all of your pieces of hardware as like little graphical icons, like my Manley compressors or my API EQs and whatnot. And then what you can do in the system is it takes the routing of all of those channels as 32 channels coming in, and then they go out. So it's like your output from your system. And then you can drag and drop stuff like plugins into the chain in any combination you want. Say like channel 1, I want my kick drum to go through the API 2500 and some other stuff. Then my snare goes through this signal chain. So all you do is drag and drop, and all your hardware is just instantly clicked on those channels. And then you just tweak a couple things, and then I will process all my stems with all of like my favorite outboard things and just bounce everything through. But it's like such a small footprint, but I'm not just stuck to using one, like one board. If say like I had an SSL or a Neve, it would just be all the same sort of sound per channel. It's not a bad thing, because those does sound great. I just wanted to be able to have more colors to choose from, but keep it still in a very small footprint and have very easy access to stuff. Because I feel like I work better in more of a closer, intimate setting. I don't like to be so far away from the speakers, or I don't like to be so far away from the equipment. I like to be very close to it. I don't know. I think that's just personal preference.
What are you capturing in the end on? What DAW or recording devices do you like to put on the end of it?
Well, I've got a couple. I have a choice. At the end of the chain, after it comes out of the 2-bus LT's analog summing mixer, it gets captured with the Dangerous Convert 80 plus, which is their high-end analog digital converter, which has got a couple nice options on it. And I also have 2 Apollo 16Xs down here from Universal Audio. Sometimes I use those because I still have a lot of their UA plugins that I like to use for some of the mixes. So I have a choice to go either way. And typically, I use the 2 Apollo 16Xs with my modular rig, which is set up over here to the left. And I have these other modules, NSO2, I believe they're called. They're these little modules that have DB25 connectors that take 16 balance inputs, and then it takes that signal and outputs those line inputs and converts those over to the 25 dB cables that I run directly into the 2 Apollos. So I can capture 32 stems from the modular sessions, and then I can take those and mix those however I want. So I have a sort of a separate little system for that, but it's worked out pretty well. Yeah, I've been pretty productive with it, and I've got like some other outboard API 500 series racks and a couple of like Empirical Lab distressors and 2 1176 compressors and stuff. Just a grab
Yeah.
bag of different things, just for, you know, processing drums different ways, and just to get different sort of like, I love playing around with compressors. I'm a big, I don't know what it is. I just love playing around with dynamics and interest in fun sort of creative ways, not in the more typical ways that maybe people use these things, but to just sort of achieve some sort of strange.
Are you recording in the end to Logic or Pro Tools, or what's your DAW of choice when you're coming to editing?
I have a few here. Yeah, I use Ableton 10. I use Logic 10. I've got Cubase on here as well. I'm also using Cubase 10 Pro. Nuendo. I also use quite a bit in Reaper. I do like all my spatialized mixing stuff that I've done, like ambisonic mixing and spatialization stuff that I've worked on for Google and other clients and stuff. I do all of that in Reaper. So I'm kind of hop all over the place. I'm not really set by one DAW. I love Max for Live. I love Ableton. I love all the stuff that's happened recently. And in like the last 4 or 5 years, I felt they've really done some really cool stuff. And when the whole Max for Live library opened up, and because I'm a big Max user, I love Cycling 74's products, and that opened up a whole new world, not only for me, but also all these other people that were developing all these interesting devices that they're giving away for free. And then it's kind of like the Reactor user library, where you can just go and look for thousands and hundreds of cool instruments that you know, you could just take apart, learn how they built things, and you know, study things. It's a very educational platform. I think both of them are, and so I think they did a really great job with that. But yeah, I'm pretty much all over the place.
Man, I
Logic.
think people learn so much from the things that you post. I mean, half the time we learn through things that you're exposing us to. So in some ways,
yeah,
you are the grand prophet, the grand professor. I mean, I love this algorithm-based exploration of generative time structures, and the whole sense of algorithmic music. The approach of which is, you know, to the most people, it must just be so confusing. Is there any way that people can try to understand this concept?
Yeah, I think some of my first initial research into this area was David Cope's books. He's a professor. He's been around for 20, 23, 25 years, and he's like retired now, but he's written many books about machine learning, artificial intelligence, you know, machine learning based music, algorithmically driven music, and did all these fascinating studies. And he's written so many books about, you know, automated music, and this was the stuff, that the ideas and concepts he was talking about, you know, this is long before any of these newer things that have been showing up now recently. And when I was at Google, when I started working in 2016, I met a person named Doug Eck, who is head of the Magenta project at Google, which is their machine learning AI-based department, and how it applies to musical-based tools. And they worked on a couple cool products. One was called the Synth, was a neural-based synthesizer. You could build it as a kit. All of the instructions to build the synth is on GitHub, and they even give you each, you know, component Mauser list to build the kit that synth yourself. Actually, we actually bought the synth kit. Me and my wife are waiting on some parts. It's going to be our first DIY synth build, actually. But nice. Doug Eck and his, Doug and his department were the ones who created that. And they've also been a huge proponent in machine learning and AI-based instruments. And they, well, that's what the department is Magenta. And they use TensorFlow, which is this app environment that they've been designing most of the stuff in. And they also created some Max for Live objects that are free to download. You could just type in Magenta or Google Magenta Max for Live in Google, and you'll see these four. And they're very simple. They're just basically these like simplistic models, ML model based Max for Live, that just basically take musical input and then they'll generate a set of sequences or gestures based on the data sets that you feed each algorithm. But they're getting more advanced. These are when I was there, they were already looking into more advanced ways of analyzing musical data and then having systems play back these, these analyzing structures, amplitude, frequency information, and then being able to intelligently write what it like thinks what the next measures of the music is going to be. And it's really fascinating. I also experimented with this here in Georgia Tech's lab here, and just right downtown. Georgia Tech has a really big ML AI based program. They have a robot. I played in a room with these robots. They're actually, they have a robot that plays a marimba that has a camera, and there's another robot that plays the drum that also has a camera. And Gil Weinberg is the head of the department there, and he's headed this. It's absolutely mind blowing. If you're ever in Atlanta, I highly recommend you go visit the Georgia Tech Media Lab and play music with these robots. It will absolutely blow your mind, because what they're trying to do is not just have a robot, play a drum beat for you, whatever. Like the way that they've designed the software is these robots are constantly listening to what you're doing. They're listening to the tempo. They're listening to, like, I was trying to trick these guys. I remember just playing with these two robots. I was like, I'm going to swing things out. I'm going to slow the tempo down. I'm going to speed up. Then I'm going to slow down again. And then I'm going to stop. And then I was trying to do all these things, and they were totally keeping up with me, paying attention to every single thing, analyzing every bit of information, and then being able to improvise. They were improvising on top of what I was doing. And that's the part was where things started to get crazy. I was like, when we started to get into a pocket, they were making these intelligent decisions based off what I was doing. It's like, hey, I want to shift the key here. And I want to shift to like 11/4 time signature and see if they catch it. And they would instantly snap to that. They were able to analyze. And then it became this really strange, usually something that you would normally do with other, like people in a band. If you're playing with, you just got this dialogue going, you guys understand each other, and you guys, if you're going to slow something down, maybe you guys look at each other, that you kind of know what to do. Everybody's place in the band knows what to do to kind of either make things more subtle or get more aggressive within the piece of music that you're jamming in or whatever. It was that same sort of feeling working with these robots, which was really astonishing. I'd never experienced that before. And just to be, for these algorithms to make such intelligent decisions, and it sounded good. Even on top of that, I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is, where do we go from here?
Yeah. When will it get to the point when they don't need a human to interact with them?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people might be scared of this technology, that it would put, musicians out of business, or, like all this ML based stuff that just analyzes these pieces of music and just generates, these things. And I think a lot of people that struggle with writing a structure of the song, I think that's like the hardest thing for a lot of people, is just like finishing an entire piece of music. I see some of this technology being really helpful for people like that. I'm interested in using it to abuse it in ways it's not meant to be used, of course. I want to confuse the algorithms, like what would happen if, and I always try to just test the limits of what something could do. Even when I was at the Georgia Tech's Media Lab trying to confuse these robots, and they weren't easily tricked. When that was really interesting. But I'm interested to create things that are entirely new or haven't been heard before using this technology. And I think that you could get to a place like that where I feel like the music industry's gotten to such a safe place where people are too scared to be different or do things differently, or, afraid that people, reject what they're doing, or, they get this comfortable space where they're just kind of following a trend. And I feel that that's happened too much in the last decades, as far as, in my humble opinion, as just an outsider looking in. I wish there were more people making crazy risk in electronic music and making more bolder statements. And, I really miss the days of people just being, you put on a record and be like, what the fuck is this? Is this even music?
Well, I think you've attained a place where, not many people have been able to achieve. I mean, for some, I love how you take the approach of saying that you're going to find the limits of a machine and then take it beyond, but somehow make it not just sound like, say, 90% of people will go out there and it will sound like less organized or musical, but you've found a way to approach things, to introduce these elements that make it incredibly, I don't know if it's because you're using math in the sense of how you approach things, but in the end, it makes it's randomness that makes sense. Like, it's a language that I've experienced you live, where I can see that you're controlling machines in such a way where I kind of sense that I can sense you getting locked in a bit to what is being created. So do you sense that, like, when you're controlling things, that with you were saying, I'm trying to confuse them and stuff. I mean, how often is it that you are knowing where you're headed?
Well, it's funny. I guess it changes all the time. There's situations where I might get some new thing that I'm integrating or trying to learn about, and that I don't know anything about. I'm just trying to experiment, figure out the parameters of the environment, understand what all the functionality is with whatever it is. It could be a piece of hardware, it could be some new sequencer that I'm trying to integrate or learn about. So it might take me a few weeks, maybe a few months to get comfortable with it, and then I start using it, within a bigger context with other equipment, connecting it with other stuff to see how well it communicates and see what the outcomes are. Sometimes stuff turns out really great. Sometimes stuff is not so great, but then you start to see the strengths and the weaknesses of that combination of equipment or that specific new sequencer or hardware piece of gear, whatever it is. And a lot of times, when I'm working on things, like, sometimes I have a general idea of like what I want to do. And sometimes I'll get pretty close to it, maybe 80% close. Sometimes even more spot on. But what the favorite thing that I love is sometimes these things will happen in the process of trying to get to that point of what happened in my head. Something will go wrong, which is typically what happens. Something goes wrong, or I hook up something wrong, or something sporadically or spontaneously goes in some other opposite direction where I'm like, whoa, this is not what I had intended to do, but it's way cooler than what I was trying to do. So I might as well just explore this avenue for a little bit. That's what I love about the modular stuff, because the modular can, one wrong thing, the power could go out for a second, or you tweak, one knob, depending on the complexity of the patch in the wrong direction, or something happens and you can shift the whole thing or lose the whole thing completely. Oh yeah.
So, when you're talking about a setup of this magnitude, I mean, I've always wondered, it's got to be overwhelming to the average person to look at this and think, like, how do you maintain a sense of control? Do you break down these floaters, as you've called them, or sub racks, into sort of like areas? Like, one will be based for a certain type of a method, like drumming, or one will be sequencing, or is it always changing?
It's the floater cases, that you mentioned is exactly that. Yeah, I float. In this picture, this is more of like a cleaned up version. I actually have a bit more on my floor than that right now, but I typically have like 14 cases that I float around the floor in different skiffs and stuff like that. This is just some random stuff. Like, this is an example. This is like a make noise shared system, which is another one that I used for different experiments. This was an experiment where I was using the shared system to control the H9000 effects processor via this Northern Lights modular one rack. It's called the RM, which is the controller that you can use it with Surge. It's got banana jacks on the top, which are in black. And you've got these attenuator knobs for each one, so you can control how strong the control voltage signal is per channel. And what's really neat about it is you can assign each one of these inputs to anything in the H9000 to control it. So and you can also store presets. So if you have like a preset that you really like, you can store those values. And what's really nice in the H9000, there's this emote software that allows you to set the parameter modulation range changes per each control for each one of the algorithms. So you can really dial in, like find the sweet spots, and then just kind of have like the modular modulate into all those really cool into those parameter spaces that you've assigned. So it gets really, really crazy really quickly. And I think that's a really cool thing. Oh yes, the Pulsar 23 is a recent favorite. Vlad from Soma Labs, he makes really, really amazing instruments. This is probably one of my favorite drum machines that's come out. I say drum machine, but it's more like an experimental sound lab, mini sound lab, because you can do such organic, strange sounding things with it. I mean, you can use it like a typical drum machine if you want, but it's really was, I think Vlad's intentions were people to explore, like get out of this linear, like sequenced kind of like, mentality where there is no linear sequence. It's basically these little touch plate sensors that are recorders. So they're like buffer recorders. So like your kick drum, and you can start recording stuff, and then you can have like a mute section where you can just like record something, but then you can like erase parts out of the signal of like, so you create these very broken, scattered, and these patterns that you would normally program because you're not working on any sort of grid. You're just kind of doing things, and they kind of lock into place, and then you can kind of like touch record, erase for like the next voice, and then the voice after that. And then before you know it, you have this like cascading, sort of like alternating Euclidean style, sort of like, non-repetitive, rhythms happening. And it just gets so interesting. And then you, on top of that, start using the alligator clips where you can patch to different points. And then, which is almost like circuit bending, because you can stack up to like 5 or 6 alligator clips per control source. So like these control stick sources on there. And then you have modular inputs as well. On the left here, you have a bank of 8 different inputs that you can assign. They can either be gates, triggers, or control voltage coming from the modular. So those I often like to use, different CV control sources that could be like, randomizers or sequencers or burst generators or all kinds of weird stuff that then I'll just use as another modulation source to spread out throughout the system. So things can get pretty chaotic pretty quickly with this machine. It's really inspiring. I mean, Vlad is a very innovative instrument designer. I love that he's really trying to think outside the box when it comes to.
He's from Poland?
He's from Russia.
Soma Laboratory, yeah?
That's correct, yep. Mm-hmm.
And the red Pulsar buddy there, is that?
Pulsar buddy, yes. Uh-huh.
Is that some sort of way, to make, I was reading something, you were talking about polyrhythmic, you were creating polyrhythmic things utilizing this box. What was that one?
Yes, yeah. I think I was gonna look up there. You can buy them as a kit. I think they're like $150. They're not too expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're relatively cheap. But yeah, you can do some really cool stuff with it. You got like 2 trigger outputs, and you can do some really, really like interesting things, like you said, as far as doing really interesting polyrhythms, and it syncs to the Pulsar's clock. Or any pulse rate. You can do like 1/4, 1/8, 1/16 notes, 24. It does like 24 PPQ per end. So the timing's pretty tight. And you've got like 4 memory slots where you can change different meters easily on the fly. So instead of it being locked at like the same tempo, you can be like shifted like double time, half time, triplets to like all at like at the split, flip of a switch. So you could do some really just interesting things that outside of what the pulsar can already do. So I think I reached out to this guy. I think it was like last year when I saw it. I saw it on a forum and someone had it, and I was like, "What is that? That's pretty cool." I'm a big pulsar user. I was just really curious about it, and I saw a video of some guy using. I was like, "Oh, I've got to get my hands on that. That's just so cool."
In this picture here, it looks like you were talking about the poly-N sequencer. I gather that's this thing at the bottom here.
Yeah, let me see where the, yes, that's right. That is a Polish company. Yes, I use quite a bit of their gear as well. The poly-N sequencer is excellent. I love it. I'm also a big monome user. I have the monome grid over here running with teletype and Ansible and norms, and which is, they were like the original sort of like push button grid creators of this sort of style of sequencer. But the poly-N stuff really took, yeah, there you've got one. Yeah. Is that a, yeah, it's a like a,
I haven't found, I haven't utilized the new apps or programs that makes this useful. I was still just using the Cycling 74 stuff, but that's kind of become a bit dated now. But
yeah,
so there is a usage for your monome now that you were talking about. What was that?
yeah. So there's they've Brian Crabtree and several others at monome. They've released sort of a new generation of instruments, and they have modules now. They've got a module that I have called Teletype, which will do like live coding and live scripting, where you actually hook up a keyboard into the front of the module, and it runs all these specific gates and has all these different modes that you can program line by line. And you could do these, you can write these scripts that can do very complicated sort of like sequencing structures or gestures. It's really, really interesting. Then they have Ansible, which is it's like their interface module for grids. It's like a newer version of grids I have down here, which is a really slim, smaller, portable version, 128, like a 128 smaller version of grids. And then there's Norms, which is this box that's sort of like a DSP box that can be a synthesizer, it can be a recorder. It's got many, many different scripts that you can load in. It can take on many different, it's really, really interesting. It could be like an FM-based synthesizer, it could be a tape looper, it could be, and what's cool about it is since Brian opened everything up to be open source, so people have been writing all these really cool scripts for each one of these devices. So you can go onto the line form and just download all this. There's so much stuff. There's hundreds of different patches and scripts and things that people have created for this that are just, even if you don't want to write a single program yourself, there's plenty of stuff to play with. It's really, really, really fun. But yeah, the poly-N stuff is going back to, the poly-N sequencer is that one's been a favorite, one of my favorites, purely for the fact of just aesthetically, it's just, you can see everything, you have 64 steps, but you can chain up to 128 steps per channel, and there's built-in clock multiplication division per channel. There's also probability-based gate sequencing. You can do ratcheting. You can do actual chords. It's got chords per step. It can do a lot of really great things, and the interface is really nice. I feel it's really classy, and it's and you can you obviously have a lot of room to store presets. It's a great live performance sequencer. I've used it a lot. I know a lot of people that see like my live streams and stuff in the studio, they'll see me using it. I think it's just a brilliant, I love just being able to sequence something, set the mode differently, change the timing, change the direction of where the sequence is moving at, or offset it instantly, or mute it, or solo it, or add in new data, or switch the data up on the fly just by a couple button pushes. And it's just so immediate. There's just, it's very quick and fast.
You kind of gave a clue to like the forming a thought pattern of saying having a clock, but then triggering other sub clocks from the clock to create
Yeah.
interesting polyrhythms and such.
Totally.
I've seen you also using the circadian rhythm tip top, the winter modular eloquencer, and various other ones. Is this? I mean, what I love about your music is your polyrhythmic coolness, man. It's always something like, I mean, I'm a drummer and I'm coming away thinking, man, this is just like bliss. It's
Oh,
not,
that's awesome.
it's not noodle, you know, it's not
Yeah.
random mishmash. It's beautiful. And it has, okay, sitting here as a guy that I've sat in front of my shit for so long, and I haven't heard something as beautiful as you commonly seemingly will find with your gear. Like, say, even for instance, the other day you posted a thing on the tiny sizer, and you've got the tiny sizer sounding like a Stockhausen produced album. So beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Of how you're achieving this without, you don't have to give away secrets unless you want to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's really any secrets. Like, I don't really consider myself like a master of anything. I just mess around with stuff, and I guess it's just my weird brain and the way that it works. I worked with analog synthesizers since the early 90s. I mean, I know you've worked with them for longer than I have. I bought my first analog synth, I want to say it was probably 1991, 99, no, yeah, 1990 or 91. And then I think my first ARP, yeah, ARP 2600. Yeah, I still have it here. My one I bought in high school. And yeah, it's that machine changed my life. Actually, it was. I don't know if I would necessarily be in the place that I am now had I not got that as like one of my first synths, because that was that opened a lot of doorways for me. Like I remember buying an SH-101, a Juno 60, and all these other like, sequential circuits, 6-track, Prophet 600, and all these synths at the time in the early 90s. And I was thinking like how like everything was always in this, it was always fixed. All the oscillators were fixed, the ranges of the oscillators were fixed, and the filter ranges were fixed. And then when I got the 2600, I was just like, whoa, this thing's like, you can use the faders, which are fixed, but then you have all these 66 patch points that you can patch into each other, and you can feed stuff back into it. And there were things when I first got that synth, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's interesting. Like, and how every time I would sit down with it, it would never really give me the same thing every time. And I was like, you know what? This modular stuff is really fascinating. Right, there we go. Yeah. I actually took a picture the other day of the, so my original ARP is the one I've had since I was 17 years old, is the one on the right-hand side. You can see it's a little older. Then the one on the left is the new Korg KS ARP 2600. So as soon as I got the Korg, I had to do a side-by-side comparison to see how well they had actually got it. And they really nailed it. They really did an incredible job on the new Korg.
It really seems like it.
It's fantastic. It really is. And it stays in tune. It's it's not as noisy and grumpy as my old ARP, but it's yeah, they did, like I said, did an absolute fantastic job. And plus you've got some, they brought it up to modern day connectivity. You have USB over MIDI. Yeah. It's got a sequencer built into the keyboard with an arpeggiator, which obviously the original ARP didn't have. And it's got nice XLR balanced outputs, and just some nice perks, and stuff that my original didn't have. I did have my ARP actually worked on by Phil Sirocco at CMS. I don't know if you know Phil.
Nice. Yeah,
he's done. He basically brought my old ARP back from the dead. He reconditioned it, did all of the. He changed out all the audio jacks, and we redid the power supply. I had the spring reverb changed out, and he did numerous added some sync switches to the oscillator 1 and 2 on mine, which was modded. I had a couple different mods done to it, and had some 1/4-inch jack outputs added out of the at the end of the chain on my 2600. So he did quite a bit of work to mine to get it to a stable, usable machine again, because I've had it for years. And but yeah, it's a great synth. I feel very fortunate that that was one of the first synths that I was able to get my hands on, because it taught me so much. I say the same story all the time, but it's, if
But is that what brought you to, like as we were talking about polyrhythms and how you can take these synths to the next level that nobody else will seemingly be able to do? And there's like, I'm sorry, I looked at the controls on the Tinysizer.
uh-huh.
Were you feeding something else into that, or some other type of modulation
Oh,
factor?
so what's going on with that patch? Yeah, that was a weird patch. So I was just exploring what it could do, and it's
I'm
basically
impressed.
got this like these breadboards
Yeah.
on the right hand side. So um, you can set, there's 3 different LFOs, and they can run at audio rate, and LFO 3 can be run at frequency modulated rates. So you can frequency modulate the other oscillators. But there's weird ways that you can interrupt those LFOs too. It's got a sample and hold too that can be, and there's an audio to gate trigger that I was using. So I was feeding the audio from the garbled craziness it was doing back into this audio to gate module, and then I multiplied that out, and then so it was like regurgitating and feeding back into itself, and then it would send these sporadic pulses to the sample and hold modules in there, and then those would send out these like sporadic, it was like a cause and effect, like something would happen, and like before you know it, like I was literally sitting there going like, what is going on here? This sounds like
imagine.
just like I said, it sounded like a dinosaur at certain points, like just angry,
So
weird.
awesome.
Yeah. And I love that you get into this patch where it's like, it just does its own thing. It's regurgitating things. It's recursive. It's like, things are folding onto themselves, and stuff is feeding back, and it's like getting combinations of clustered different control voltages where it's like different parts of the system are fighting to control different sources at that time, and it creates this it creates this cacophony of weird stuff that can.
Most people, the essence of a patch is like they struggle at building, like, CV to 1 volt per octave in, a gate to your envelope generator to your VCA. Okay, maybe I got that. No, but where do you throw in your first modulation factor for those people that are just starting out?
I always tell people, there's no right or wrong rules to it. Like I'm one of those people. It's like, hey, well, think about it this way. Why just use a steady clock for your clock generator? Why not use an LFO or an envelope generator or something that's got a shape to it that changes the ramp in time, where you're dealing with time not on this straight linear thing? Like mess with the time a little bit. Sometimes I'll, influence the clock with like a sample and hold or something. The input of a clock was some sort of unsteady, control voltage source, or it could be anything. It could be a combination of things. Sometimes I like to use, these sort of like switch sort of style modules where they can sort of combine multiple different signals, and then they sum those signals out, and then you can turn the switches. Mutes is a fun one. I think I've used that quite a bit. DivKit's mutes module is really simple module. It just takes, the switches in the middle, it turns it off, you turn it to the right, it'll allow it, and you can actually like push signals in, combinations of signals in to combine different things at one time. And it's really fun to kind of like take multiple signals at one time, and then kind of like flip the switches in different combinations to get these, these exotic, strange control voltage shapes. And, I don't even know what to call them. You'll get like jagged mixed with smooth, with like crazy, bipolar, upside down inverted signals, and stuff that's like wave folded in there to ring modded, and like it's such fun to kind of explore to see what happens, and then say, hey, well, what if I apply that to a filter? What if I apply that to effect? Or what if I apply that to a clock? Or what if I, like, to me, there's no right or wrong way. It's just kind of see what happens, and eventually, after you tinker around for a bit, you eventually stumble onto something. You're like, oh, something interesting is starting to happen now. Let's see where this goes. See if I can have a further dialogue with what's happening.
It's probably found it advantageous to have your ARP 2600 to understand the idea of patching and stuff, because I always felt that like when modular synthesis came into my life, it made me understand, like when I was working with other synths, like actually better what I was kind of like doing on the hardware. So when you started getting into more modular stuff, did you get into a modular between the 2600 and the Euro modular, the advent of that?
I had many, yeah. I bought the EML Electrocomp after that. I bought it from University of Connecticut. I was around that time I was calling a college university music labs and stuff because no one wanted that stuff back then.
Yeah, no.
Early 92. Oh, you did? Nice. Yeah, I bought my Electrocomp. I bought 2 EMS. I had an EMS Synthy AKS. I bought
when they were cheap.
That in Texas. Back when they were cheap. Yep. Yeah. And I'm kicking myself because I sold all of these back. Oh, no. And then it was like, I would say early 2000s. And my synth tech, my friend Tim at the time, we were having a really difficult time finding parts, especially for the EMS. And I remember we were talking to Robin and these germanium transistors that kept going out on my Synthy. Unfortunately, it had some problems and it was bumming me out because I used that instrument for like 6 years on so many recordings and on my records. It was absolutely one of my favorite, still to this day, one of my favorite portable modular little synths. I would take that everywhere with me. I would like wear headphones and I'd take a little R8 drum machine and run it into the Synthy and process it with the ring modulation and it's just could get so gritty and gnarly. It was just such a such an aggressive synth. And but yeah, like I said, mine wasn't in the best shape and was starting to show signs of failure. And I was scared. I kind of just said, okay, do I keep it and take the risk of maybe not ever having it work and not finding a tech that could work on this? Because at the time, everyone was throwing these things away, right? So no one wanted this stuff. I was like, but I want to use this still. But at that time, several of my friends were like, maybe you should sell it now while you can get some money for it before it's worth nothing. So that's why I sold it. I sold it to some guy in New York who was a vintage collector. I don't know if he was making music. He was just a vintage synth collector and he ended up buying it. And I was still kind of not, kind of on the fence about it, because I was like, oh man, it's such a great box, but it's definitely showing signs of not, I don't know a year from now if it's going to still be working. And I should probably jump now and let this guy buy it so he can put it in a glass case and look at it and someone can enjoy it rather than me being frustrated and angry that it's not making music for me anymore. Because I just wanted to make music with it. And, I didn't know that all this stuff was going to come back. I didn't know that at that time, as you know, if I could have seen into the future, like today, I would have been like, no, I'm going to hold on to it. There's going to be plenty of people that will be able to fix these and, and revitalize, like Tone Tweakers. There's all these companies now that refurbish and fix EMSs and old EMLs. And like I said an ARP 2500, I had a left wing cabinet, ARP 2500 for a couple of years. It was really fun that I sold, and a Surge. We had a Surge here, a 6-panel Surge that I used a bit. I learned a lot, and all of these instruments to me were it was so great to see how different each instrument designer approached synthesis. You had the basic foundations like you were talking about with the ARP. I think starting out with the ARP was so great because you're like, we have our oscillators, we have our voltage control amplifier, we have our voltage control filter and our envelope generator. What does an envelope generator do? What's a noise source do? What's this? Right. What are these like basic terms, these synthesis building block terms, to build the vocabulary up? That was a great synthesizer to start out on and learn on, and then take everything you learned from that and apply that to other synthesizers that had very similar setups, especially like the Synthy. You look at the Synthy, for example, it's very similar. You got 3 oscillators, you've got a filter section, you got a ring mod, spring reverb, you've got a joystick for doing, you've got a couple extra cool things, but the basic structure of the sound sources and the sound shaping capabilities of that machine are very similar setup. I mean, they sound very drastically different, but if you're trying to understand it from just a learning perspective, they have a very similar look as far as what you have available to play with. So yeah, it was a very, I tell people all the time, that's like was a very educational period for me. I looked at it as more as like, I'm making music with this stuff, but I'm also going to learn about these instruments and what they teach me. And that was a monumental time for me of learning these things and trying to understand. And I didn't realize that all of that time I'd spent would pay off later on down the road when I got into Eurorack and bought, all these other synths that are, out today. I would have, we're living in really exciting times.
You've been working on the Nord G2 modular for a long time and been kind of a proponent of that.
Okay.
Has that always been something that you've enjoyed as well, I've noticed?
Oh yeah, I found out about the Nord G2. Actually, the G1 was from Sean Booth from Autechre. Sean had mentioned it to me. We were on an old like BBS server. We used to talk on this server all the time, trading patches and just geeking out. We always loved geeking out. And you mentioned to me, you should check out the G1 Nord. And he was telling me that they were using it quite extensively in their tracks and also were big into the Nord leads. I know they were using the Nord lead 2s quite a bit. I know Rob was using them. And I was just looking for a synth to do more kind of interesting, FM-based synthesis to make. I wanted to synthesize drums. I wasn't really happy with the stuff that was available. And Sean had pointed me to the G1. So I checked it out. I got it. And I was blown away by it. I was like, this concept is awesome. To be able to create patches in the computer, set up everything the way you want, and then just dump that patch to the hardware and then have the physical knob interaction and then being able to switch and do patch morphs. And just, it was opened a whole new world for me. And eventually after that point, I got 2 of the G2 Nord modulars. After it went from the G1 to the G2, and I did a bunch of work with Native Instruments prior to that, doing sound design for them. And I did some sound design projects for Korg, like on the Radius and some other synths back in 2004, I believe, or 2003 maybe. And so my stuff started to get out. People started to be like, okay, who is this guy who's making these crazy patches? We need to get in touch with him. And luckily, Nord had reached out to me. It's like, hey, we saw that you picked up a Nord G2. Would you like to create patches for our internal factory library? And I said, I would love to. That would be awesome. Maybe I'll learn a bit about this instrument and at the same time get some sounds for myself and make sounds for you guys. So it was an all-win situation. And ever since that was like 2004, 2005 when I worked on that, I fell in love with that instrument and it stayed dear to my heart. And I still use it even to this day because it still sounds great. And
yeah.
And you said you have one as well? You have one?
I did. I had one. I have one. I haven't used it in a little while. I always feel like I need to go back to things, after you'll realize you haven't used it in quite some time. But, and I've also noticed you get a lot of mileage out of the what is it? The Nord 2 drums. Oh
yeah, yeah. That one's I had gotten that many years ago. I want to say now. 7 years ago, was it? Yeah, 6 years ago. Yeah, when I got the Nord G2, it was, or not G2, the Nord Drum 2 it was basically trying to solve a problem that I was having with playing live modular shows. And yeah. I initially in my first shows, I was using a 6U case, which I eventually upgraded up to a 12U case that I was lugging around, and then a skiff. And thing I was noticing, because I wanted to do all my drums with drum synthesis. I didn't want to use samples, so I wanted to have much more control. I was wasting almost a case and a half just to do my drums, just to make like 6 drum sounds, right? Like a kick, snare, hi-hat. So, I mean, as you know, it's like, all right, I've got a noise generator. I've got to have a bunch of VCAs and a bunch of envelope generators and modulation sources and stuff. And before you know it, just to make 6 drum voices, you've eaten up, the majority of your case. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to, I can play for what, 5 minutes? And so that was really annoying. So I was like, well, what could I get that would still be a drum synthesizer that I could use and store and recall patches quickly? Have like at least 6 to 8 voices somewhere around in that ballpark, and that's portable, that I could take with me. It would be easy to transport, not add a lot of weight. And the best solution I could come up with was the Nord Drum 2. And it's incredible the range of sounds that you get out of that box. It is, especially because it does additive subtractive synthesis, it does FM, it's got different noise types, and it's a very flexible machine, great, really tight, snappy envelopes. You make incredible kick drums and snares and hi-hats, and you can tune everything. That's what was really important. So I wanted to be able to like quickly tune all the voices to like maybe the key of the song, or just to timbrally fit within the patch better. And because it was all synthesized, the voicing matched almost perfectly with all the other oscillators and stuff I was using. You almost couldn't tell that it was, separated from the system at all. It just had such a perfect sound and integrated so well. So that became a favorite for me for many, many years. And I still use that Nord drum. Lately, I've been using it with Max MSP. I've got a couple Max patches that do crazy randomizers, and I used I don't know if you saw the video I posted of this. It's called the Massive MIDI Modulator. It's a little, it's like a little, I don't even know how to describe it. My friend Julius made it. He also worked at Google, and it's basically, we'll take every CC value, and you could modulate every CC value in the Nord Drum to like the craziest degree. And you can like do these things where you have all 6 voices going crazy, or you can selectively just like have stuff being randomizing and like totally getting destroyed. And then it uses accelerometers, so you can tilt the little controllers, so you can control how active the modulation happens. Like the LFOs will slow down as you turn it to the right, or if you turn it to the left, it'll like speed everything up, and it completely makes that machine crazy. It's so awesome for sound design. Yeah, I've made so many great like crazy samples, and just like weird. Some of it doesn't even sound like drums anymore. You get it so like, you get it to a point to where things are just getting so modulated, it just becomes this like sea of crazy like FM based tones and like weird like wave folding feedback stuff, because it just crazy awesome how bizarre it can get really quickly. And it's still, I feel that it's a fantastic little.
They're going to go up in price now on the internet, like within the next 5 years.
Yeah, they're hard to get these days. Actually, a lot of people have been holding on to them, and they are.
So I always found that modulargrid.net was kind of interesting in that. If you look on it, basically, can you see that? Can you see the modular grid?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's kind of interesting because, to people that might try and wonder, what are you doing? What do you have up there? What are all these things? This can give a clue to the devices that you're using. I don't know if this is what you're up to date one, but
I've switched out a couple things, but for the most part, this is the main meat of the live rig, that I used pretty frequently. And
what's nice about, you click on it, it basically will tell you, what the module is, and basically you can read up on what it does. And of course, it doesn't come with patching instructions, but
that would be great. I think Modular Grid's awesome. Yeah, it's such an
awesome place to build like an idea. But I noticed that you very active on it in the sense of like keeping up to date and so on. Is that really just so that you can make sure that your case is okay, or you really want to publicly say, hey, this is the gear I really like these days?
Actually, it's actually more for me. My memory is really bad. As I've gotten older, and maybe my kids have done a number on my brain, but for me, Modular Grid's been a great place for me to organize my system. And sometimes, and I have different versions where I've like rearranged things to try certain ideas out. And like, I was like, oh wait, what did I do that made this really cool combination of stuff happen? So what I'll do is I'll go back and I save like an alternate version of the patch using some different modules. So you can like go and you can save multiple different versions if you have I think they call it like a unicorn account or whatever, but you can store as many patches as you want. So I have all these like private patches, but I've left my live case up because I think the majority of the questions I get asked the most about are like my live rig. So I was like, you know what, why don't I just make it public? And then that'll give people an idea rather than me having to always private message people telling them what I use. I was like, I'll just put it up on Modular Grid and they could just look at what I'm using. I'll make it a whole lot easier. So, but this is pretty current, like all the sound sources, a lot of the effects processors and samplers that I've been using. And what I've done, this system is basically current because I've shifted my focus to be less like live, like synthesis and more like sample manipulation lately, because going back to the whole thing, when I was doing it all with synthesis, it was just, I was carrying like 4 cases of stuff out to a show that was killing my back and like running through airports. And I was like, I've got to figure out a way because, 90% of the people that are coming to my shows, maybe there's some people there that care that it's all done with like live synthesis, but I think the majority of the people there just want to hear some really interesting music. I think that's really the most important goal. So I changed my setup. I was like, okay, maybe I'll do a lot of the less heavy lifting, off the synthesis. I'll have a couple of my favorite digital oscillators like the Mysteron. I've got the shapeshifter in there. I've got 3 of the, the mutable instruments braids. So when I want to do some more musical type stuff or, and you can see in there, and I've added a MMF filter for each one of those. I just didn't like the internal filters of braids, so I used, and these are great because you can ping those too. They work as like low pass gates as well. You can make kick drums. They're really great filters, those WMD MMF filters. Yeah, they sound great. But yeah, those are, this setup is a whole lot of fun. You could make albums of music with this if you wanted to, just with this setup. I feel like there's a whole world just in here. And at the bottom, this bottom rack is like the sequencing brain, so to speak. You have the Eloquencer, which is basically got 8 channels, and then I have the rotating clock divider, and then this other little module in between here is the R111. Or sorry, the R110, which is a random gates and trigger module that accepts a clock input, and then it will generate random triggers and gates based off that incoming clock. And then you can also, as a choke control, so you could send another clock to kind of mute out the random probability of those gates and triggers. So you can create these really cool things happening. And so I'll trigger other things in my system with that. And I mult out the clock out from the Eloquencer into the 4MS rotating clock divider, and then I send that. I'll multiply that clock out in divisions to something like the NanoRand and do like random step sample and hold stuff that's in time with the clock, so that I have stuff kind of moving around but at a slower pace. And I'm using the Morphogene in live mode there. That's a really fun one to kind of do like live granular sound on sound, tape splicing, granular processing. And that can in itself gets just really nutty really quickly. But yeah, so this is really neat. And these two the Skipman, the blue knob modules, this is really interesting. So what I do with these is I have a bunch of program patterns, and I switch these out. Sometimes I use a circadian rhythm, sometimes I use the Eloquencer, but it's basically the same idea. I'll take a bunch of stored patterns that I've programmed, and then run all the 8 outputs into the Skipman modules that you see here with the blue knobs. And what the Skipman modules do is they're probability removers. So where the knob is all the way to the right, it lets the gate signal pass with 100% accuracy. But as you turn the knob counterclockwise, it starts pulling out pieces of data. So the further left you go, it completely shuts all the incoming signal out. But somewhere in 30%, you might get 30% of the gates coming through, some of them won't. So you create these instant polyrhythms on the fly. Yeah, this one here, yeah. And you have mute buttons too, so you can mute different combinations while you're changing the probability of the incoming gates. So you're creating these like polyrhythms on the fly and being able to like mute and it's great for live performance. Like these, wow. This combination is extremely powerful for generating, just like you said, you were talking about polyrhythms. This is like one of the secrets, is being able to be, it's actually removing stuff. And I was using burst generators as well, where you would burst streams of gates and stuff like that. But I found that the complexity was more interesting as I was taking stuff away, actually, rather than adding more. So these have become a huge, just a major component to creating some of those polyrhythms in my live shows. For people that have always been curious about that, that's basically how I find all this really cool sweet spots. You can find them really quickly just by turning a couple knobs, muting some things out, and depending on the incoming rhythm, you get so many different things. And if your rhythm's constantly changing, so a thing I like to do in the eloquencer and in the circadian rhythms, I'll run what Gurr called the Devine mode, where you can take all your patterns and it'll do either a coin toss, where it'll either step forward or backwards again, and it won't just go in a forward pattern or sequence, sorry, linear sequence. In Devine mode, you'll pick a group of patterns, say like you pick 8 patterns on the circadian rhythm, or even on the winter modular, and it'll just randomly pick. You don't know which pattern it's going to pick out of that 8 that you've selected, so you don't, it's like a grab bag, and then it starts creating, it's never repeating. And then as you're taking away stuff with the probability filters, things are just all over the place, and before you know it, you're getting this really interesting combination of rhythms on the fly that, things you wouldn't think to normally do, just because there's so many things that are affecting, you're just setting the tempo. And then you can change, it's great because you can change the complexity. You can get very complex very quickly, or you can get things very minimal very quickly with just a couple of knob turns and button pushes. So,
and lots to study there, folks. I mean, one thing to be said is that you're also super proficient with your field recording. It seems like you're always devoting time to going out and gathering stuff with the right equipment in the right way, and coming back. And I gather you just must have sound card upon sound card of the most interesting stuff waiting for these sample playback units to be triggered by.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've been recording, gosh, I'm thinking how far back it goes, but yeah, early 90s when I was recording stuff to DAT, my little Sony DAT recorder. I used to take that out, and I had a little like T stereo mic that I used to record stuff with it. And then we eventually, for a hot minute there, we were using the mini discs for a bit, the Sony MZ series, like the MZ10, the MZ50, which were nice because they were really small. If you remember, they were like little 74-minute mini CD compact discs, and you just put them in. I mean, the compression quality wasn't great, but the portability was great. And I could go to, record in train stations and different places and not have like a bunch of equipment with mics looking all scary, like making everyone intimidated. I was like, why is that guy recording us? Because I always try to look for like really discrete ways of recording ambiances, or if I can not draw a whole lot of attention to myself if I'm trying to go out in public recording stuff. It's always a good thing. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with that. I think I fell in love with that whole idea when I was working with like my early samplers in the 90s, when I was working with the early Akai S1100, S1000, later S3200 and 3200 XL. Then I migrated to the S5000, S6000 samplers, and as I'm sure you guys have used those samplers and stuff as well. That it made me think about sound differently when I started using them in the context of a sampler, where I could create key groups and match completely different sounds that didn't have anything to do with each other. And you could pitch the sound up or down and add loop points in it and apply filters and reverse it. And those concepts, which are extremely simple, you know, things now. But to me back then in the early 90s, I was blown away by that idea. Wow, I could take any sound and I could use, you know, me hitting a trash can, that'll be my snare drum. You know, breaking glass would be, you know, another drum or something. Like all these different things that didn't really go together now could be together in a music composition. For me, it was like such a radical idea. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was doing field recording back then. I just called it sampler food. I was like, I'm just capturing food for my sampler to process at the time. And so I just cataloged stuff. I was just out all the time recording, and I still do. But during that period, I was recording whatever I could get. And, you know, anything that'd be interesting to add in a composition. And I just kept on doing that as I became more prevalent doing work in sound design. That became, I got lucky that became such a huge thing, because a lot of the work that I later did in video games and working with commercials and advertising and stuff came in really, really handy, where I had to do a lot of field recording. So it was great. Yeah. Coming up through those channels and learning how to use that stuff and then applying it later on where it came in really handy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The whole essence of like synthesis these days is that I mean, so many synthesizers you'll turn on and you'll have a bank of Richard Devine sounds in it. So you've got your hands on these keys, like I guess mostly in the development stages now with the sound design. Do you ever find that you know, you're on your way to designing your own synth?
Man, I wish. That'd be a dream of mine one day. My friend Alessandro Cortini just designed his first synth with Tony Rolando with the Strega, which is a beautiful instrument, which I feel represents exactly what Alessandro's about. I hear that instrument and I feel like that's Alessandro's sound. That's what makes his music. I would love to one day design a synth with a manufacturer. I've been so crazy busy that I know that project Tony and Alessandro worked about 3 years on. It was not something that came together quickly. They debated on lots of different strategies and how they were going to put that synth together, what the form factor was going to be, what functions were going to be there, what things they were going to make available to users, what things to leave out. And there's so many things. And, you know, when you're designing an instrument, you would hope that it would be useful for everyone and that you're also designing something that hasn't been done before, because I feel like we're living in an age right now where we're seeing a lot of the vintage classics make a return. You know, it's like the attack of the clones. All the clones are coming back. Model D, 2600, and which is not a bad thing. I think that's awesome. I think that it's bringing the world of synthesis to more people, and because it's such a fascinating, fun thing. Like, you know, just like me, I don't know where I'd be today had I not had those instruments. You know, I make the joke that I bought all the original synths for Behringer prices back then. Yeah, right. When no one wanted them, they weren't worth nothing. They were just at pawn shops all broken. That was my music store back then, was going to secondhand pawn shops in Atlanta and just traveling all up and down the East Coast, just trying to get my hands on whatever I could. And, you know, I got stuff for next to nothing all the time. I remember buying an Oberheim expander for $150. Nice. It was on the floor next to a bunch of golf clubs at a Salvation Army. I'll never forget that. I was just like, stuff like that, you know, like
the old days.
In the old days, yeah.
I still got a CS80 for $180.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
I thought it was too heavy. But you know,
it's a beast.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've even noticed, like even on my most favorite plugins by Steve Duda, the Nerve, you have a.
Oh yeah, Steve. Yeah.
Steve's great. I love that that BST, and I know you had some involvement also with the Nave and the Quantum, and you kind of speaking like the Quantum has been like one of the most superbly designed synths in the last 10 years. Is that still how you feel?
Oh, absolutely. I think Rolf, who is the main engineer, chief engineer behind the Quantum, good friend of mine. I actually knew Rolf before he was working at Quantum. He was an iOS developer. He made an early synth called Nlog, which was really cool. And he also made a Eurorack module called Gainsbourg. I don't know if many people know it was a dual VCA, really nice VCA, still have it, very high quality, really loud, lots of good headroom. So he was in the Eurorack world for a hot second, and he also made a ZDSP card called Broken Error Codes, I think was the name of it. And so he was kind of in the scene. I was in touch with Rolf for quite a bit during those days when he'd sent me his module and I worked with it. I was like, this guy is really interesting. I was like, I'm going to stay in touch with Rolf. I know he's doing interesting things. And the first thing that he approached me with, he said, hey, look, I just signed a deal to work with Waldorf. They've agreed to release my first iOS synthesizer called Nave for the iPad and iPhone. I said, sure, this sounds great. And he's like, it's going to be a dual wavetable synthesizer. We'll do text, talk, speech synthesis. There's going to be great effects, multiple filters, modulation matrix. He gave me all the specs. I was like, hey, sign me up. It sounds amazing. Great. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. So when I got that, I was literally blown away. I remember writing Rolf. I was like, oh my God, you've outdone yourself. This is hands down, one of the coolest iOS apps I've ever used on the iPad up until this point. And Rolf was like, oh, thank you. And such a sweet guy. And we went back and forth. And I think, for that initial factory run, I did 128 presets for Nave, and just exploring that blew my mind, all the different textures and sounds you could get out of it. And after that, because of how well that did, they eventually ported it over to a VST audio units plugin that people could use in their DAWs. And then Rolf had mentioned to me, he's like, I'm going to move in advance and take this idea and hopefully take Nave and do like a version 2.0, but with way more features and do a full-fledged synthesizing engine. I was like, well, keep my number close by when you do that, because if I know if it's going to be anything as cool as what Nave was, I know that whatever you do next is going to be amazing. And then that's where eventually the Quantum came from. And then I was also asked to work on that and was once again absolutely blown away by Rolf's work. It was, just the everything about it, the way that you program the synth, just the layout, the ergonomics, the industrial design. I think it was Design Box did the design on that synth as well. And it was it's such an elegant synthesizer, the way it's laid out, the lighting, the touch screen. It's so easy to work with. I felt that Rolf really nailed it. Like a lot of synthesizers, you kind of have to fight with to really get cool sounds with it. And it's hard to kind of get your confidence and flow with new instruments. But the way he designed it, it was just such an easy, fun, intuitive environment that really, really invites the user to explore and really dig in and have fun. And that is a rare thing to find these days, especially when you're integrating very complex, synthesis methods in one environment. Like you've got kernel oscillators, it's like the FM synthesis, you've got the particle-based granular synthesis, you've got physical modeling, and then you've got wavetable synthesis that you can use in any combination, which are not your, I'm sorry, and there's an additive subtractive mode too. We could use, subtractive synthesis as well, but it's very complex what it does, but it makes these more complex ideas much more easy to work with. He made the UI and the way that you access certain things and assign certain things much more user friendly, so that the experience isn't, you're not getting stuck going, oh, this is, I don't understand enough about this topic, or the synthesis method, I'm not really getting what I want. You really don't have to know much to get really fun stuff happening on that synth. And I feel that's what makes that synthesizer such a great tool for people who want to explore making new sounds or just have fun. Or, I've made hundreds and hundreds of so many great sounds with that synth. And now he's just released the Iridium, which is the smaller desktop version of that, which now adds the CV gate capabilities. You can integrate it with your module. I need to get some more rooms. I would like to get one here, and it's got the 16 voices, and he's added a couple little nice things to it. But yeah, overall, like that, I've said it before, and I feel it's one of the most inspirational, one of the coolest synths that's come out in the last 10 years.
So if you have to buy a polyphonic synth, that would be the one.
That would be the one. Yeah, and I have a bunch of the newer polys, like I have the Moog 116 and a bunch of other ones, and Dave Smith's new Prophet 5 I bought, and the UDO. I just got the UDO. Super 6 synth, which is the binaural FPGA based synthesizer. It's kind of mimicking like the Jupiter 6, but like on steroids, which is a pretty cool, really cool synth as well. There's a lot of great cool synths coming out, but the Quantum, I keep going back to it. It's still the king for me.
I like to hear it when people rave about something. And you worked on the Op6 and
oh yeah, that's right.
What's it called? The Wave.
Oh, the Mod Wave.
Mod Wave.
By Korg. Yeah. Those were really two fun projects. Actually, I've been working with Korg on and off since 2004, 2005 initially. I think I mentioned before with the Radius synth, and then I eventually worked on the Oasis, which was their like grand, huge, do everything synthesizer. I think they later built like the Kronos technology, but there's and I did a bunch of patches for them on that, and then eventually started working. I met Tatsua, who did the mini log, so they had asked me to work on the mini log when they started that whole new sort of line of synthesizers where kind of Korg was kind of like revitalized, and we're kind of like, brought back in the spotlight. We're making cool, like new, niche analog synths. And so I worked with Tats on that, and eventually the Minilog XD and a bunch of the other stuff that came out after that. And then most recently, like you said, worked on the Op6 and the Mod Wave. And those were just fantastic. They did I'm still blown away. I have 2 of the Op6s. That's how much I love the Op6 when they came out.
Really?
Yeah, they're just, it's such a powerful, easy to use instrument. When people think about FM synthesis, they start to get a little bit, oh man.
Yeah.
Some people can get along with it. Oh yeah, nice. I love the DX7. Yeah, I still have my DX100. I still have all my TX80, TX81Zs, TX802s here. Yeah, I'm an old Yamaha FM junkie. I bought a lot of those synths back in the 90s, and I still held on to them. I couldn't get rid of them. They had a special place in my heart. But yeah, some of the new stuff is just, like the Montage. When I worked on the Montage for Yamaha, that with the FMX engine is super advanced, and now that's using machine learning to analyze. And
is that like one of the most complex synthesizers you maybe worked on?
Definitely. Yeah. I think underneath the hood, I think people don't realize how much is in there. It's it has the appearance of like a motif workstation, which is very confusing, because I remember when they sent it to me and I was like, well, I don't know what you guys want me to do with something. Like, you guys probably have better people that would make sounds that are like PCM based pianos, and that's not my kind of thing. And they said, well, we're going to send you a software update that's going to make a lot more sense. It might be confusing now. And yeah, when they sent me the update, I realized, oh, okay, there's an FM synthesizing engine now that's in this synth that's extremely powerful. That's like having 8 FS1Rs in one box with fluid automation control over 1,000 parameters and like a mod matrix that never ends per every voice. And I was just like, there is so much stuff happening here. Is anyone going to go through the trouble to program all this stuff? And they were like, well, that's the part why we're hiring you to see if you'd be interested in programming these sounds, because we're scared that maybe the customers may not want to dive as deep into this. And I said I'd love to be up for the challenge, because I love programming the FM, and I made some really wild stuff with it. And then when it went to the 2.0 version with the smart morph technology, where they're using machine learning, the machine learning algorithm learns these FM based patches that you create. Like you say, you select 8 different sounds, and it'll give you 1,024 different variations based off those patches that you fed. So it analyzes all those data sets, and you can morph through the patches with automation through the super knob, or assign an LFO to this trajectory path that travels over these different colored regions that represent all of the thousands of different and hundreds of different variations of all the patches that you've picked. So you kind of just move the fader in, you're like, oh, that sounds so crazy. And then you can just store a new preset from that. It's just fascinating how deep and interesting that synthesizer can be. Like, I've just had so much fun coming up with new sounds with that. But yeah, there's just so much out there. Like, it's such an exciting time. I tell people now that we're living in really the golden era of synthesis and synthesizers. This is just so much fun stuff right now. Like, it's a great time to be making electronic music.
But you're still on about the quantum versus the montage.
Definitely. Yeah, I love them both for different reasons, but I find that the quantum is just endless fun.
Because of the hands-on access of the way the interface is made that makes it attractive to you?
It definitely, it's everything. Yeah, the instant way that you can assign things, just the way that everything is you can see everything in front of you. There's no hidden menus. They really did a great job. Like, your LFOs were all on the left-hand side. They're colored differently. They're colored in yellow, and your noise sources, depending on what your oscillators are, if you're working at additive subtractive mode, it's always in red. Granulars in green. Like, so you have these really nice visual indicators of what state every piece of your patch is in. There's no guessing what's going on. And it's just the visual feedback that you get is it's just so elegant. I can't think of many other synthesizers that look and feel as nice as it is to, I don't know any other synth that is as fun to work on. But yeah, they did a fantastic job.
As for a smaller synth, you're on about the Op6 versus, say, something like the Wave State or the Hydra synth, or perhaps
yeah, I have the Wave State as well. That Wave State was another great fun one. I played with the Hydra synth at NAMM, which I was really impressed with. I only got about maybe 20 minutes on headphones with it, but what I did hear was really cool. I would like to sit down with it further and explore it a bit more. I just haven't had enough time to check it out. But yeah, since I did a bunch of patchwork with Korg. They've sent me several, I was working with the prototypes of them. So I got the chance to work with those instruments for a much longer period of time and get a real feel for what they could do. But yeah, the Hydra synth would be really fun.
I got lost here for a second. Am I still there?
Oh yeah, you're here. I saw a picture of a cat for a second.
And then I noticed that you're always traveling with the lovely OP1.
That's right. I've got mine right here. Yeah.
Okay, so the funny thing is like, this is the synth where I think Cyrus Rex had it for like.
Oh, Cyrus, yeah.
He had it for probably a year, and then I got one, and then I said, after I got it, I called him up. I said, "Why didn't you call me and rave to me how good this thing is?" Like, I've been so blown away ever since I've got my OP1 at the design of it as a synthesizer.
Oh yeah.
Can you believe it?
It's amazing. Yeah, I've had mine for a year. I mean, how many years? Maybe 8 years or 7 years. Yes, it's still working, and it's my favorite little portable synth to take with me when I'm traveling. If I'm flying or whatever, I always carry it with me in my MacBook. Use it in either like keyboard control mode and it's also fun because of all the different like sequencers in it. So if you want to sequence plugins on your computer, you could just use, like Timbola or one of these weird sequence modes to just do these like out of the box weird things just on the fly. It's such a I love quirky little weird instruments like this, and the sampling capabilities, and just, you can do drum synthesis. You could do, it's great. Yeah. The radio is awesome. Yeah. It's awesome.
That's where you get me. It's got a radio. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I like to pick that as like one of my favorite small gadgets. Do you have a favorite small gadget other than the OP1, or is it OP1?
Let's see here. As far as like recent small gadgets, I really like the Electron Digitone.
Oh
the
yeah.
FM based synth. They're really small. I have the Digitac as well with the sampler, which is good. They're sitting on my desk right here, but the Digitone I love. I just love the sound of it. I could program on it really fast and make really great drum sounds with it, make really great bass lines and just all kinds of strange percussion with it that sounds really, really nice. And I also have the rhythm as well, the electron rhythm that I use a lot, but I love the smaller form size factor of the Digitone and the Digitac. But those are
Basic also picked the Digitone as one of his favorite FM synths to
oh, he
exist.
did, yeah, Derek. That's great.
Other than the Dave Smith
Tempest. Yeah, I remember I remember a video I posted, God, when I worked on the sound design for Tempest for Dave. And I've worked on a bunch of patches for a lot of Dave's synths. I love Dave's stuff. He's such a great guy. But yeah, I remember working on the Tempest and I remember uploading a video. It was like on Facebook because I had one of the only prototypes at the time. I did this crazy patch where I was like doing all the pitch bend wheels. And I remember Derek being like, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's this new drum machine that I'm doing sounds for Dave Smith. And I remember telling Derek, it's like, dude, you've got to get this thing, man. It's so much fun. You're going to kill it when you get your hands on this. And sure enough, when he got it, he started killing it with it. And it's a brilliant machine. Yeah.
His life, you know?
Yeah.
I think, the whole essence of Dave's line. I wish I could go further into Dave Smith's line. I had the budget to check them all out, but I trust that you're doing probably sound design on all of them. All of his line of recent Prophets and the.
I did the Prophet X, and we did the Prophet 6 and the Prophet 12, and a bunch of them.
Which one really shines for you out of those ones, out of the Dave Smith?
It's interesting. I would say most recently is probably the Prophet 5 reissue. I didn't think I'd like it as much. But I'd heard so many iconic records growing up where some of my favorite bands, they were using the Prophet 5. So many records, it's like, you know what? If I'm going to buy a Prophet 5, now's the time to get it, where I could get a new Prophet 5 that's brand new, not have to worry about maintenance and because they're very fickle machines. I have many friends that have like 2.3s, vintage originals, and that are constantly, dealing with maintenance and keeping them just up, just to keep them running. And, I was like, do I want to really deal with that? Or do I just want to get a newer machine that's going to be solid for a really long time using newer technology? So I just went ahead, and when Dave announced that he was going to reissue them, I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Like, sold. And then I got it, and the first thing I did was just run it through a tape echo, and like because one of our favorite artists is Basic Channel. I love the Basic Channel stuff. And they are Maurizio and Mark Anestis. I went to Mark Anestis' studio not last year, the year before, in 2019, when I was at Super Booth. Oh, nice. We were there with Michael Zell from Zell AM1 Mixer. And he was like, hey, do you want to, Chris, their AR guy was like, hey, do you guys want to hang out with Mark in his studio? We met him at Hard Wax, and Mark was super sweet. He's like, yeah, come to my studio tomorrow. You guys could play on my AM1 Mixer. And I'm a huge fan of Mark. He's like one of my heroes. Like, my Basic Channel Burial collection is like, I have every one of their records. When you think of like dub techno, like they're the pinnacle. Like, I don't know anyone that's created music that's it's really special music, timeless to me.
I totally agree. I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. And
well, that's good to hear that certain things have really tickled you in that sense. Similar things too. I know you're a big fan of the Autechra guys too.
Yeah.
But one thing's got to be said is that, man, your recent records are definitely strolling past the planets and solar systems that your counterparts are creating. Like, we talk a bit about your records here. Well, I mean, of course, we could start way back and go from 1995 all the way up. But talk about your warp time and everything, but really, you know, the sort, is it Sort Lave or
Sort Lave?
Sort Lave. The 2018 record for the Time Save label, our buddy Venetian Snares.
Oh yeah,
It's just such a alien world of planetary exploration, and I think it's like it kind of seems like you finally like came into your. Did you feel like you finally found the doorway and found it opening, and then all of a sudden, okay, I'm here? I mean, it really is a grand sounding.
Oh, thank you.
Like,
Yeah, I'm so glad.
Anything you'd ever hear from anybody, if you listen to Microscopium Recourse, it's kind of like I mean it's planetary, but it's also like I mean I want to say it touches on those classic Stockhausen sort of like the perfect mixtures of effects with sound, and it's so unpredictable that it's like an experience. And so for anybody that doesn't do drugs or anything, I mean, this is like drugs without drugs, really.
Totally.
So,
yeah, it's great that you made the reference to Stockhausen. Stockhausen was such a huge influence on me very early on at the age of 17 when I bought, or I didn't buy it, I actually inherited a record collection from my friend Tim, who was my synth tech at the time. His wife and him were in an apartment. They were going to move into a house. And he said, Rich, I got to get rid of all these records. My wife doesn't want them to come to the new house. We're going to have kids. So he donated like 5 crates of records to me. And at 17 years old to get, I was listening to a lot of early, just a lot of Detroit techno at the time, a lot of like, just, you know, a lot of early rave music at that time. And to get these records that were just John Cage, Stockhausen, Kraftwerk. I remember getting a ton of Kraftwerks of Herbie Hancock. It was all kinds of stuff, like just grab bag of stuff. But I just remember hearing the Contact record on None Such Records. That record just, I was like, I was so perplexed. I just didn't understand. I remember thinking otherworldly, and I said, who is this person? Is this person maybe have mental problems, or, you know, like, I love that whole idea of like, you know, this crazy person making me like a crazy person making music. That was a whole new idea to me, where you don't understand the intent and there was no format to it. It wasn't a music that was trying to fit in any sort of genre or be a part of any scene, or it was just this rare thing that you just put on. And it was very similar to listening to Morton Subotnick's music when I heard Silver Apples. And yes. I was just so perplexed. I just didn't even know how they made it. I was like, this isn't, these records aren't made with linear sequencers and drum machines. They're painting with watercolors, and things are blending together, and it was like there's organisms growing and dying in the watercolor paint, and that's what it sounded like to me. And I'd never heard music like that before, and that really had a huge impact on me, and shifted. I knew hearing that music, I wanted to somehow take those things that I liked about that music I learned early on and somehow inject pieces of that had influenced me so much into a new way, in my own sort of take on it. So it's interesting you brought that up, because those definitely played a major role.
It's like if we were discussing wine, you know, we could go on and discuss the, you know, the curing, the candor, and all the, you know, the wood used and all the things, and basically, you know, you achieve something that they, you know, I think they, you know, they suggested, but you definitely expanded upon. I mean, for even me as a listener, I cannot figure out how you're doing it. You know, I mean, it's like half the time I'll figure like, okay, it's not so much about sound anymore as it is about experience.
Yes, that's a huge part of it.
I don't think you would ever hear them the same possibly each time, because it's open to a form of interpretation as well.
Absolutely. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it as well. And you did a really great job it kind of seems like the culmination of your collecting of instruments, and the way that you've now established your recording system and implementation of it is showing greatly within the recording. And
thank you.
It's not something that someone could go out and do and easily achieve. I mean, you've kind of like reached this level where it's no wonder that you're working with Sony or for Jaguar or Nike, is because they're guaranteed to get a sound that nobody will ever be able to make or recreate.
Yeah, it's definitely can be challenging. Like the record you mentioned, Sortlave, was quite an undertaking to put together. It was a lot of work, and I'm actually working on a new album right now. It's already over an hour and 30 minutes. It might be 2 hours. I don't know how I'm going to condense it down or just release the whole thing as it is, but I'm really excited to release it. It's like the next chapter, I guess, to Sortlave. It's a further exploration of like all these other ideas and things that I'm trying to push even further. And now using newer technologies and newer sequencers and things that I didn't have access to when I made that record. So now I can push things even in crazier directions. So really excited to share that stuff as it's kind of shaping up right now. And that stuff is, yeah, it's getting pretty well. Now I'm starting to do live coding that's controlling Tidal cycles, is controlling the modular via the ES9 expert sleepers, and then being able to like do these sort of nested functions within functions where you're doing like rhythms that are speeding up and speeding down and degrading and multiplying, and really fascinating stuff that you can just at any point interject at any lines of code or have several lines of code going at the same time. So I'm getting into some very interesting territory that I've not experienced with any other environment before. So it's starting to take me to some fun places. So I'm really excited to share some of these new experiments.
What is tidal cycles?
Well, Tidal cycles is basically, I don't know how to describe it. It's based off the Haskell programming language, and it's a free program. You can just, type in Google if you want. And let's see if we get the correct title for their URL, but it's just basically, tidalcycles.org. And basically it's just a free open source software that allows you to make patterns with code. Whether it's live coding, and the patterns can be very, very complex, and they can be nested patterns within other patterns and patterns outside of that. It's really, really cool. They've got a great website. It's a lot of documentation if you want to dive in. It's a little bit of a kind of tricky process to get it all set up because you need Super Collider to run. And Super Collider, for those of you who don't know, that's another programming language that's based off of Smalltalk that's been around for a long time. James McCarthy wrote it, who now works at Apple, or worked at Apple, now he's retired, but James is amazing. I was a big Super Collider user for many, many years. And then the people that wrote or are part of the Tidal cycles, there was an extension set called Super Dirt, which is what Tidal cycles connects into, which is this like sample base of a collection of samples and all kinds of other objects that if you type in Tidal cycles like SD1, it'll pull up a snare drum, or SD2, it'll pull up the second snare drum in the library or the first kick drum or whatnot. So you can like immediately start doing things without having to import your own samples, just to kind of grasp the concepts of how it works. So that's really helpful. But Super Collider also acts as the audio I/O and MIDI I/O protocol that takes information in and out of Tidal cycles. And then you do all of the actual live coding from Visual Studio Code, which is another application that's connected to it. I know it sounds all crazy, but once you get it all running, it's a lot of fun. For me, it's just been, I've always looking for new ways of experimenting with rhythms, and like you said, you're talking about polyrhythms. I'm always interested in exploring what you can do different rhythmically and things what I've been calling impossible rhythms, or what Tidal cycles is capable of doing, is doing things that would be impossible to play or impossible to sequence. It will do. There were some of the coded, some of the scripts and stuff I was doing, I felt like I was going to break my computer. I was like, oh, I don't know what's happening, but there's like, you feel like you could do damage. Like, I love that. I don't have many environments where you're like, you could make something get so crazy. You're like, oh, this feels like I'm doing something wrong. and it could break something. And you could get into that with that, which is really fascinating. But yeah, polyphonic, polyrhythmic, generative, all of those terms are basically describe what the language can do. So you can do extremely flexible things in terms of like, doing very complex arrays of different patterns and experimenting with patterns and posing patterns and other patterns and combinations of patterns, and definitely something to check out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is this the something we haven't heard on previous albums? It'll be on the next album.
Yes, no, none of this stuff has been released yet. This is all stuff that I've just kind of been behind the scenes working on, and probably got like 10 tracks finished now. Some of them are pretty long. One of them I finished was 23-minute track, 23-minute long song. Yeah, it's goes through lots of different crazy changes and stuff. But yeah, some pretty cool stuff that's come out of these experiments so far. And I've been trying to keep it like a lid on it until it comes out. So I'm really curious to see what people think.
Yeah, I'm excited, man.
Yeah. It should be fun.
Say, 2020 has been a weird year with COVID and everything. And you made a record earlier, January 2020, Cystic on Black Noise label, 4 tracks. And one of the tracks, is like 19 minutes long, but it is not boring.
Yeah, that's right. It was 19. Yeah, that record sort of happened by accident. It was I never really meant for those tracks to ever be released. That basically was my live show that I was going to play out this year 2020. Yeah, exactly. And I played 2 shows. I only got to play 2 shows of the set. I played at the Black Noise Party in LA, and then I opened up for Dan Deacon here at Variety Playhouse, which was a great show. We had a mosh pit and people went nuts for it. I was like, whoa, people really like these tracks loud on a big PA system. And my friend was like, Searchai, actually, who you know very well, Searchai, said, Rich, you should put this out. Like, there's no reason you should throw this music away just because, we're not playing live shows. Maybe we just turn it into a record and see what happens. And I was like, sure, why not? I don't see why would there be a problem. So we got the tracks mastered, and it was weird. It was a weird thing for me because I revisited the sound of acid. I haven't made acid music in over 25 years or 24 years. And I don't know what compelled me to want to make an acid record. I really don't. I don't know why I'm not listening to other acid music right now or anything, and I just thought it would be really fun to play these acid tracks out live because I just hadn't heard acid music in so long. I was like, I just have this yearning to want to hear acid music on a really loud PA system. I hadn't heard it in years. It'd just be really fun. So I was like, well, why don't I make some tracks and a really fun live set and see what happens? And, Search, I heard the tracks, like, we should just put this out on Black Noise and just see what people think. And luckily we sold out of all the records and everything. We had to repress already a second time because we oversold what we had. We're like, whoops, we got to make some more. And, but yeah, it worked out really well. It was, like I said, sort of an accident, a release that never was meant to be, but sort of worked out in the end, despite the situation.
Kind of cool how you chose like a more simplistic setup, utilizing the Roland TR-8S and 2 303s. I'm gathering you chose the Devilfish as one of your 303s, and what was the second one? The Cyclone?
The other one, yes, the Cyclone, and I had it modified by Dan at Midnight Engineering. I'm not sure if you guys know his work, but he does fantastic. Here, I can show you real quick. This one here, it kind of mimics it's right here. If we can get a good picture of that. So this is his modification to the Cyclone. It's a lot of mods. I've got there's another jack here, and then so he's doing some stuff that goes far beyond the Devilfish. I have a Devilfish too that Robin worked on, but yeah, if you have a Cyclone, you could get these for pretty cheap secondhand, like $500-600 now on the used market. and he can only do the mods to these because they have enough space in here for him to add his boards in. You can't do them to the V2 Cyclones, the newer ones that are thinner, but this is a pretty badass modification. So I use this and the Devilfish extensively, both of them on the record. But yeah, you've got overdrive, you've got frequency modulation on the resonance and the filter. He's got like a super boost thing. There's all kinds of little strange, and he's also got independent outputs for the square wave and the sawtooth, which is really cool. And then he's got all these others, the accent peak, slides, and sweep speed, the FM amount. And he's got really, really great overdrive on this that's really, really crunchy sounding. And he's got this fuzz switch that's got 3 different modes that gets it really really, really gritty. You could get really, really gnarly with it. But yeah, he did such a great job on it. And I'm going to actually have him mod a couple other ones. I'm going to do the, I've got a couple of the DinSync, the Re 303s that Paul has created, which is, they're great. I have 2 of those, and Dan agreed to do one of my Re 303s when he starts doing the mods again. And we're going to try some different mods this time. He's got a whole bunch of new stuff that he's learned. So I told him, hey, let's do them all. Let's just do all the mods and see where it goes and have some fun with it. But yeah. So I like I said, I just kind of revisited the acid sound. It's been I grew up listening to a lot of that music. It was big influential for me, listening to early Aphex and Reflex records and loving that stuff. And yeah.
What about the TR-8S? How did you like working with that?
Oh yeah, that's a great drum machine. I have to really salute Roland. You know, they've been sending me a lot more of their newer instruments, a lot of the boutiques, and I got the MC 707, which was really nice over here. But the TR-8 drum machine was just such a fantastic drum machine, and the whole idea for the record Cystic was that I wanted to create this record on a very like limited set of tools. I didn't want to have like all my fancy modular stuff and everything. I want to just see what I can do with just a drum machine, a small 6U modular case, and a couple 303s and a bunch of Vex pedals, and just see what happens. Because quite literally, I was going to have to take that was my live show. That's all I had. So I didn't, when I created the record, I was just like, all right, because I wanted to sound different. I wanted to sound more raw, more, completely different than my previous record. I wanted to sound like a live record. That's why the tracks were so long. When you said I think the first track, Incid, I think if I pronounce it right, is like,
it morphs nicely. It's not boring.
Exactly. Yeah.
With boredom, but not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 10 songs in one track, it seems like, because it goes through different movements, and it starts at one place, and yeah.
And again, you have achieved polyrhythms. So, I mean, you got another.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to guess that something in your 6U rack is probably what, the Eloquencer or something that's getting a trigger that you're able to run outside of the norms of what the drum machine's running in. That's the only thing I could think. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, there's, I was using the ER301 too, which is this really cool sampler. That's like a huge part of my show that does a lot of the polyrhythm, weird sampling, shifting, triggering stuff. And then
really?
A bitbox. Yeah, I'm using the bitbox too. The bitbox is interesting as well. And it's really cool because the way that I'm using them together creates a lot of the weird, like you said, the polyrhythmic bass stuff. And then like the TR-8 in that record was just doing like the kicks. So the kicks would be kind of constant, but all the top stuff would be like these weird sample stuff that's like recursively triggering and creating all the poly stuff. But there's so much fun stuff that you could do with resampling drums. But then like one thing I like to do is like take like an 8-minute sample of like these synthesized snare drums that are all completely different, that are being processed differently. And then I'll like set up sample markers where like each marker will trigger a different sample, but you won't know say it'll like put it on random and it'll trigger like a random different sample every time. So you never hear like the same snare drum, or I would do these progressions where I would process the samples in a long thing, like the individual cuts, and then every time I would hit and play, it would start getting more and more fucked up as it moves through the piece. So it goes in a linear order, and then everything else would also be changing at the same time. So you're perceiving these changes. It doesn't sound like samples. It just sounds like the sounds are changing.
Yes.
Because it's all in a mix. And it was these like little tricks that I was learning to really try to figure out how to use these samplers in really creative ways to where you didn't hear too much repetition. Like you were talking about how it didn't sound like it was like a 20-minute song, but then it wasn't getting old. But the reason I was doing that was trying to keep things dynamically changing, moving through different things all the time, so that you were hearing 20 different ideas in one song. And that's how I was achieving that.
And because it moves in such a way that is kind of unpredictable, your brain is able to perceive like that it's not the same song for this time, that you're experiencing these different changes. But that's something that you're super good at, Richie. Like you're the master.
Oh, thanks.
Of this stuff. I think I love how 99% of the people that I speak to on here are uber modest, and like I want to be like, just point out that like what you have worked towards in their 30 years or whatever of working in this plus world, you really you've got an orbit going, and you've got a universe, and
thank you.
It's a gas.
It's a pleasure to hear that coming from you, because I've been such huge fans of your guys' music for so many years. You guys were like some of the first. Skinny Puppy was one of the first bands I remember getting into, being like, oh my God, these guys are exactly what you're describing to me. You guys created this whole universe that I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. The visuals, the aesthetics, everything. It was just, super cool. It's super cool to be here talking with you.
I noticed that you are also using two Eventide H9 effects units live, and that it's like kind of like, is that effects that you can pre-program outside of the H9 and then load in there? Or is that something that you just program on the H9s?
Yes, I have pre-programmed or algorithms that I have set up in my set. And what I did is I use their iPad. They have an iPad app, free iPad app that connects via Bluetooth. So you can set up a sequential order of each algorithm and how you want to use it through the entire set. And there's a module that I use. Let's see if I give you guys the correct that I use to do control voltage to both of my H9s. I think it was, I don't know if it's in the picture there, but it's the I can give you guys a link. It is the cEvin MIDI 3U. They make it. It's a module that it's 10 CV. It's 10 channels of CV, CV to MIDI. And it works with the H9. You can use it with the Strymon pedals as well. And you can do 10 controls and do CV offsets and all kinds of stuff. So what I do is I have multiple like random sources, like in control voltage signals, automating all of the parameters of both of those H9 effects units. So that's why I used them, and I used it specifically with the Northern Light EU M2 module, which allows me to control 2 of them. And it's the same company that when we were showing the picture of the H9000 with the Make Noise Shared System, they make that same module. So yeah, it really brings those effects pedals to life when you can control them with control voltages, especially 4 to 8 to 10 parameters at a time, especially like reverbs, closing decay times, and delays that can be like in time or off time. And it just opens up this like whole new world of sonic possibilities of being able to have that much control over them. And that was such a fun mixture to use with that particular setup, to just not have the pedal be just like on or off. I was like, no, I can really have some fun with this and like morph things into each other. And it gets really, really interesting. I highly recommend it for people that have H9s to check out the Northern Light modular stuff. That module, the cEvin MIDI 3U, is it's like a game changer if you're a big fan of the Eventide, or if you're a big fan of the Eventide pedals and stuff. It's definitely something I recommend checking out.
Man, the fact that you always get inside all these things, though, you'll find a way to get inside and everything. I mean, that's why nothing ever sounds like as you know it. It's like, no, Rich has found a way inside that thing, and yet it's always noted.
Yeah.
Okay. I noticed that you have an MPC X, and I was wondering, what's your thoughts on your favorite drum machines or the world of the drum machine world?
Oh
What's your
yeah.
attracted to the most?
That's well, I mean, I would say my favorite's still the Lads Pulsar 23. That's still my favorite drum machine that's currently out. Is getting most creative award drum machine. But as far as like good, like solid drum machines, like the MPC X is great. I've been an MPC user since the MPC 60 when I had it in high school. The old Roger Lynn. And then I went to like all his other incarnations. I still have my MPC 2000, 1000. I had the MPC 5000 still in the room over there. I actually worked on sound design for them, for Akai on that. There was like a built-in synth in that. So I worked on patches for that. There was a short period where Alesis and Akai were kind of doing a thing together. And so I worked with some people over at Alesis when I worked on the Andromeda and some of the other synths, Fusion, and when they started to kind of dab into the analog realm for a second. But yeah, the MPC-X is, I think, is an incredibly powerful workstation, especially with all the CV gate possibilities and like with the latest firmware updates that they've implemented. I mean, the machine's become a real powerhouse. It's like you've got like a 16 gigabyte internal hard drive. You can store all your sounds and sequences. It's almost like very similar to like the Quantum, very elegant touchscreen interface, beautiful, like just interface, and just, it feels great to work on it. It's one of those devices where you could do everything in the box if you want. You could just do everything on that.
That's why a lot of people like Josh Hawley are raving about it lately, is because it's got him off his computer and off his dot, and actually controlling CV and gate stuff through it and recording that way. He's some people have expressed having a lot of fun being taken away from their computer and given a more hands-on approach. You definitely write a different style of music that way too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think you do. That's why, even on my like last two records, that's why I completely was like, you know what, I'm not going to do them on the computer. I'm going to just use my ears and listen and use the hardware and figure out this way of, getting this feedback and having this like sort of dialogue between the instrument and me, and seeing how far I can push this setup that I have without having to look at a screen. Because I think sometimes, and this isn't necessarily for everybody, but I feel like I tend to get into really bad habits when I use the computer. And for me, at least, I would like go back and use the same plugin chains. I have like my startup templates that I use all the time, and same plugins and stuff. And that's not a bad thing for most people. It speeds up efficiency flow. You can be more productive in certain ways, but sometimes it can be kind of a creative killer too. You kind of like get into the same old, it's like Groundhog's Day. You open up the same arrangement stuff and you're yeah. At least for me, it was, I don't know if it is for everybody else. So I was kind of like, I want to go back to using hardware again and see if I get better results doing that, and see if getting away from the screen and like not looking at like a timeline editor would really help me. Because when you look at a timeline editor, you start to think about that. You start thinking about time differently. You're like, well, at 1 minute, we should probably make something happen here. We should be doing something. And you're making decisions based off what you're looking at, rather than what you should be emotionally connecting with by using your ears, so to speak. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to do things differently and see if making music, because that's how I started making. I didn't make music starting out with computers. I made music with hardware and CV gate and MIDI. I wasn't using a computer until much later on. So it was kind of like I came back full circle. I kind of went through the whole computer stuff, and then I was like, I want to go back to using hardware and see if I get better results. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that now at this point in time, working with the current hardware tools that I have available, you can do so many great, cool things. and get some really great results without having to touch a computer, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it's not for everybody. I know I have other friends that they come to my studio and they are just like, dude, this is, I couldn't work like this, you know, and I just need Ableton Live and I need my plugins and my controller, and I'm fine with that. And that's totally fine too. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I feel that people should just use whatever they're most confident and comfortable with using to get the best music out. So.
Do you have something when you enter your studio that's your go-to? It's like, I always go to the first.
Oh man. Oh, that's tough.
Like when you
Jeez.
start a modular patch, is there a particular sequencer you start with?
Oh, lately, most recently, I've been using the vector sequencer by 512.
Oh wow.
This one is blowing my mind away. Yeah, my friend Jim Coker at 512, he made this really cool software environment called Numerology. It's been around for a long time. I use Numerology for quite a bit, and Jim's amazing. It's just amazing software programmer, electrical engineer, like just a brilliant guy. And he had made this Eurorack module called Vector, which just, it's mind blowing what it can do.
Right
just
now. Have not heard of it.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's really, really nice. Pretty big module. It's got a screen, 2 screens actually, and you can do some very sophisticated sequencing arrangements. And I've also got the expander with it. It's been so inspirational to work on it because you can get into such strange, unusual situations so quickly with it. It's been kind of like my go-to recently for just new generative sort of stuff with the modular. Next to the monohm stuff I've just recently got into, so I'm really excited to get into like some of the newer like norms and teletype stuff, which is kind of in a similar vein, but more in the scripts and exploring what you could do with that. So yeah, I've been really excited about that. That's kind of been like a go-to fun the new instant gratification, get me weird stuff quickly kind of sequencer of choice.
I guess, you know, when you got everything going, you got to ask the question.
Yeah.
What is the speakers there? Are those atoms? No, they don't look like atoms.
Oh, no, those are ATCs. It's a company from the UK. Those are the SCM45 speakers, are the ones that are behind me here. These speakers are absolutely fantastic.
That's the one, huh?
Yes, yeah. I don't know how to explain it. A lot of my friends that are mastering engineers have been buying these, and you'll see a lot of like mastering studios throughout the world that use ATCs. They become really the standard, I guess, within the last like 5 to 6 years, and easily understood. I mean, I understand why. That soft dome mid tweeter in there, the amount of detail is just absolutely staggering. The clarity, the imaging, and you know, my previous speakers that I was using, I would have to go to my car and do like 5 or 6 different mixes and corrections and be like, man, I thought I mixed that bass low enough, or why is the snare too loud? Or there'd be these issues that would sound a certain way in my room. And, you know, my room's treated, like everything's acoustically treated pretty well in here, but you know, speakers are really important. And when I got the ATCs, I've been mixing on the ATCs now for almost about 3 years. It took me about 8 months to get used to them. I'd go to my car and I'd be like, you know, play the mix. And I always do the test in the car. That's like the first place I go, is just listen to stuff in there. And I was like, I don't have to change anything. This is actually the first time in my life I've ever used a speaker that was so accurate, that a translation was so accurate that I didn't have to change anything. I was like, this is a huge time saver for me, because I was struggling, and I went through multiple different monitors and still struggled with bass issues and phase and, you know, every kind of other thing that you could run into, because I don't make normal music. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. So you run into all kinds of weird stuff along the way. And so I wanted a speaker or a set of monitors that would really cut down the guessing time for me. That, you know what I mean? Just something that really, really is transparent and is really, really, you know, what you're putting into them is exactly what you're going to get out. And you can say with 100% confidence that this, whatever you're working on, is going to translate to other systems to almost like 90 to 100% accuracy without having to change anything. So they weren't cheap, but I feel like they're worth, they definitely saved me so much time and energy. I feel like they're worth every penny. One of the most important investments I think I've made in my room, besides room treatment. And, you know, I think that's crucially important.
That's a lot of hours each day to be devoting your ears to something. So, you know, it's a good, I mean, they're tax deductible too. So
yes, that's true.
Do you use a sub with that too?
I do. I have two subs here that I'm using with them. I'm using two Genelec SAM subs, which are calibrated. They're digital subs. And I'm also using next to them the newer Genelec 1 speakers, which are also like the new, I want to say they're sort of like the self-calibrating speakers. So I also have a pair here. I'm using the 8341s, which are the bigger Genelec self-calibrating speakers, and they use it's like this new coaxial three-way design. They're super accurate, super pinpoint accurate as well, but use DSP technology too. So they use this special software that basically calibrates the speaker to where it's at positioned in your room, and it finds all the nulls and all the reflections and things, and then it auto compensates and corrects that with the DSP footprints that it loads into each speaker, which is incredible. So you could take these speakers and go to a whole different studio, recalibrate them to that room, and you'll get a perfect, you get your mixes near perfect to them. Whereas the ATCs don't have that. I actually had to spend, you know, a good 8 months listening to them here in the room to get things right. I mean, they still translate perfectly, but still takes a little bit of time to get your ears acclimated to them. Whereas the Genelecs, you could travel to multiple different rooms, take them with you, and just do the calibration process, which takes about 2 minutes. And also it works with their subwoofers, if you have their subwoofers, which corrects all the phase alignment issues and problematic things that can happen when using subwoofers. So they've been lifesavers. Yeah, so the Genelecs are kind of like my work editing speakers, and then my ATCs are basically like final mix before it goes out the door, last check. Before we send it off, you know, so it's that's kind of how I've been working in the monitor world. But
that's what we call a job done right. You know,
yes,
do it right and
do it right. Yeah.
I have one last question from you, from the legendary Omar Torres. He asks,
"Oh, Omar,
Rich, when will we see the legendary leprechaun dance?"
Oh, I hope Omar's watching this. Oh man, that's great. Oh, that brings back great memories. Oh man, Omar's one of my favorite people, man. One of my great friends growing up.
He's a great guy, and
oh, he's so great.
Big up to Omar.
Yeah, oh man, I love Omar. Yeah, he's ever since when he moved up to Tampa, me and my friend Matt, we got super tight with Omar. He taught us so much. I mean, built our computers. I remember being at Omar's house. Poor guy, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're like, Omar, dude, our computer's like crashing. It's not working. And Omar would be like, all right, bring it over, Rich. We'd be over there, you know, and like me and my friend Matt, we would just, oh man, there's so many great memories. Like just, but yeah, Omar's great. Man, makes great music.
Actually, how I met you was Omar brought you over to the house one day, and I think about 2002 with Otto von Schirach.
Oh, with Otto, that's right. Yeah.
I think Josh was with you guys too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's right.
Always great to meet people that Omar would bring, because it'd be like every day it'd be like somebody that you'd be like, you know, learning new stuff or hearing some new stuff. So it was always great.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Look at this. It's a family affair at your house.
Oh yeah. This is great. This was on Halloween. Yeah. This was such a cute thing. Gertz from Erica Synths that sent the Syntrix over, which is basically like their interpretation of the EMS synth. And I was really excited to play with it. And I'd set up this patch, and we were going to a Halloween party. So my kids were dressed up to go to the party, but we were waiting on my wife. She was like upstairs, I think, like putting on makeup and getting in her costume. So my kids were like, Daddy, what's this? And I was like, hey, it's a new synth that just came. You guys want to play with it? And so they just went in and went deep diving into this. And it was so much fun to watch them. I love having them in my studio playing with my stuff, because it's just like, to them, it's like a whole new world to them, where they can just explore, and they, weird sounds to them don't sound weird. It's normal to them. They've grown up with all this crazy stuff around them. So they see some new thing, they're all excited to try it out and see what it does. And to me, it just warms my heart. I just love seeing them play with this stuff with like this sense of wonder and, exploration and a surprise. And even my son, he's like, oh, Daddy, it sounds like a dinosaur. Or their imagination, they think of these things that, you don't think about, or you're like, you're actually right. It does sound like a whale or a dinosaur or a monster. Or I love their little brains when they play with this stuff. And some of the stuff too, like I'll just let them play with stuff, and something will happen. I'll be like, what did you just do there?
Oh yeah.
My son was like, I put this in here, Daddy, and I put this. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's not the way it's supposed to be, but that sounds really interesting. I never would have thought to hook that up. And he's just plugging in things just because it's just fun to plug stuff up. But then when you look at what he did, it could have been something totally wrong, but it made something really cool. I've recorded a couple things that he made just by accident that were just super fun. It's great having kids around.
You see them gravitating towards being musicians, or you see natural aspirations coming forward?
Definitely. My daughter right now is taking singing lessons and piano and guitar lessons. And I built her a little studio upstairs where she's got like a mic pre and her microphone. And she's really loves the Novation Circuit. It's this little tabletop
right
groove box. She loves that thing. So she's been writing little songs with that. And I gave her my old TR-8 drum machine. So she's got that up there because I'm trying to get her learning about rhythms and writing songs in time. And we've got a Fender Rhodes up there, an 88 key Rhodes that we have next to her little station. And I gave her a couple of Moogs. She's got like a Moog grandmother and a sub fatty that I gave her. And then Yamaha hooked us up with a Modi X, an 88 key keyboard that I worked on. So she's using that to learn her piano and do her lessons and stuff on. So she's got a little mini studio that I created up there for her, but she's already like she's 8 years old, but she's already written 3 or 4 songs that she's trying to, it's just so great. She's so proud. Oh, I am. Yeah. It's just so amazing to see how creative and how fun music is to them. And, it's brought me so much happiness and really enlightened my life that I hope it does the same for them, Yeah,
absolutely. Let's continue.
You can only hope.
Richard, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
A learning experience for everybody, and an inspirational experience.
Oh, most definitely. It's an honor for me to be here with you. Absolutely is.
Thank you everybody for your support on the side here, making your comments as usual. From the Patreon, Tony, Gerno, and Yada Bomb and crew. Your album's coming out soon, so we'll keep an eye open for that. I cannot wait.
Definitely. Yes, it'll be soon. Definitely.
Okay, keep us posted though.
Will do.
All the best, Richard. Have a great day over there.
You too. Thank you, Kevin, for having me on.
Thanks again, guys.